most of us have probably liked or used Windows 7 at some point in time, whether it's today or whenever. I mean, fair point. It's quite a good operating system, building off of Windows Vista's new features while fixing its instabilities. But you don't really find it anymore, do you? Mainly because extended support for it ended more than 5 years ago, and since then, software support has been dwindling. I mean, Roblox just ended support for it last month, so it really begs the question, how usable is Windows 7 to this day? So, to get some context on Windows 7, the initial plans for Windows 7 could be traced back to before Windows 2000's release, with the next three major versions of Windows after Windows 2000, Whistler, Longhorn, and Blackcomb. After a lot of Blackcomb's features got absorbed into Windows codename Longhorn, Blackcomb was in a bit of an awkward position as Windows Longhorn's development kept taking longer and longer, and eventually Blackcomb just got shelved. After the disastrous release of Windows Vista, Microsoft had an experiment called the Mojave experiment, where they were basically just rebadged Windows Vista as a different thing and had people use this rebranded version of Windows Vista as a social experiment, and people liked it. As such, this kind of helped with Windows 7's development, which, if you already didn't know, Windows 7 is based off of Windows Vista's codebase. A public beta would be released in 2009, and later down the road, a release candidate build would be released. Windows 7 was released to very positive acclaim in October of 2009 and sold very quickly, with things boosting the sales in different places such as hamburgers and the Nanami Madobe anime girl in Japan. Just as a side note, Nanami Madobe is not an official character of Microsoft, but kind of associated. I'm not going to get into that right now because I don't need to, but moving on to other things, Windows 7 is the last version of Windows to have a service pack, the last version of Windows that can run on the original Pentium, something it's not supposed to do, and honestly, to some extent, you could argue it's the last true version of Windows. Mainstream support for it ended in 2016, if I remember correctly, which I didn't, because mainstream support actually ended in 2015, and extended support for it ended in 2020. Extended security updates for some versions continued into 2023, with the latest exception of all of this being in October of 2024. You may know that I have done quite a few things regarding Windows 7 on this channel.
It actually has Windows 7 COA on the bottom, at least a little package. If I have Windows 7 COA, why am I using this PC for everything that says unsupported hardware? Well, here's the catch here. But I think we should just finish this off. Well, finally, it's time to install Windows 7. It feels weird. We're finally reaching the end of this journey. I don't know what to say. Finally, we're at the last step of this. Let's finish this off. Alright, so I think we should get going with this. First things first, I want to get some stuff installed here on day one, and I need to install updates to make sure this doesn't go poorly. Spoiler alert, pretty much all the updates failed on the first day. I had to reinstall literally all of them. Oh, and just a little bit foreshadowing, Internet Explorer 11 was installed successfully, but Windows Update didn't think it was installed, so that went as well as you think as it went. However, day one, now that we got that out of the way, when I first opened the little laptop for the second time, because I left it in sleep mode, it actually woke up and took me straight to the desktop, which is interesting. Well, I guess we should try some solitaire. Can't really play a lot of games on this thing because it's the same system that didn't like Peggle.
And so, you can generally tell that I don't need to go too much more in depth about this version of Windows, so let's move on to the computer that we're going to be using for this video. We're going to be using the HP Compaq 6005 Pro Micro Tower again. You probably remember this computer from my Windows 7 for a week video, and I feel like you probably already know the specs, but just to give you a rundown, this thing has an AMD Phenom 2 X3 at around 3 GHz if I remember correctly, 4 GB of RAM, a 500 GB hard drive, and an ATI Radeon 4200. So I say, without further ado, let's start this up. Gonna need that flash drive later. And by later, I mean soon. Before I go further, I want to mention that I opted to record the gaming stuff first and then get into the main use. So we're gonna see a bit of a time skip here, but that's okay. We'll save the gaming for later. It's gonna be interesting. So I suppose we should probably start with MS Paint. The accessories got a big upgrade in Windows 7 after having gotten little attention in Windows Vista, and I think it's about time. Paint got a new ribbon, similar to that in Microsoft Office, and like I previously mentioned, we're gonna draw a program icon, specifically Windows Media Player. Next up, we have WordPad, which is kind of similar to Microsoft Word, but is much more limited in features compared to Microsoft Word. Like Word, we can do word processing in WordPad. I think that this upgrade for the program is quite good, especially when you compare how little WordPad evolved in comparison to Microsoft Word. But we can type different things, and we can include things like images and whatnot, so that's kind of cool, I guess. Another thing that got an update was Calculator, which, as usual, we can do calculations in it. There are also different calculator parts such as a unit converter and a mortgage calculator, making this program more useful. Next, we have sticky notes, which is now actual sticky notes, not the Windows XP Tablet Edition sticky notes. We can write down notes here, and we can also change the color and whatnot. We also have some changes to Windows Explorer, such as the additional libraries, and among other revamps, so that's kind of cool. Next up, we have Windows Media Player, which has seen some big changes since Windows Vista, especially with its playback screen. On another topic, we have Windows Media Center, which we can use similar to Windows Media Player, as in it can play videos, Windows Home Server, you know, that is what I would say, if only the computer did not run into, let's just say, a little problem. Oops. Nonetheless, we're gonna keep going. We have Windows Movie Maker, which is actually a part of Windows Live, because I'm gonna include Windows Live here. So, Movie Maker is fairly straightforward. It's a video editing thing that is fairly simple. Can make different things, like we're gonna use a title card, and we're going to add effects and stuff. So, it's pretty cool. So, let's go check this thing out. I'd say that's good enough for what I have to actually... Now let's export it, and it stuttered quite a bit here. Luckily, Windows did not blue screen again, so I think we should move on to Windows Live Photo Gallery. This allows us to view all our photos and whatnot, and we can make small edits to these. There's also Windows Live Mail, which contains features for email and calendar and other things. Now, let's move on to some of the applications I think were popular during this time. To change up the mix a little bit, we're going to start with iTunes, which is Apple's music playing program. Apple still maintains iTunes for Windows, surprisingly, which is interesting because they don't really have it on the Mac anymore. I think the reason they do this on PC is because while Apple iPhones are really popular, so is Windows computers. Next up, we have Microsoft Office 2010, which features different things such as Microsoft Word, a word processing program, and among other programs, Microsoft Excel 2010. Once again, we're going to be clearly biased towards blueberries, because of course I've got to be biased towards the best berry of them all. And this time we're not going to say that 10 septillion apples have been sold. We also have Paint.net, which I'm using this instead of Photoshop because I don't have a copy of Photoshop from this time frame. I mean, if I spent a bit more time, then I could have gone for Photoshop Elements, but meh. Paint.net uses a .NET framework, and it's in fact the program that I used for all my thumbnail stuff to this day. And there's one other program that I want to show you, that being, I want to show Supermium, because while it wasn't a thing in the main lifetime of Windows 7, it is a program that is quite important if you are going to be using Windows 7 to this day. And just as a note, this video is not endorsed or anything, so let's go browse the web. So, my own website loads perfectly fine. And compute and stuff. So, let's go watch some YouTube. I think you could tell which video I'm going to click and what I'm going to do next. A slight bit back, I took a look at a Dell Optiplex 3020 SFF, which is kind of a bit of a small computer. You could fit it in a car, but this interesting specimen of a computer is light enough that it could probably be placed in the back passenger seats of a car. For reference, I have a Ford Escape from 2020, not very special. Anyway, to answer the question of really, I'm looking at YouTube here. It took some time to load, but it's tolerable. Yep, that's right, more YouTubeception. We can also look at Reddit, even the newer Reddit stuff, but I prefer old Reddit, so there's also that, which is cool. We can also look at other things on Google search, and that's generally going to summarize the programs that I want to look at. Next, let's look at gaming. So I previously mentioned in my Windows Vista video that the second half of these videos was going to be a bit on the dry side because of the gaming support. Well, I kinda take that back a tinge, because I got games working on Windows 7. First off, Toho 10 Mounted of Faith, because of course I'm gonna give that another go. There's also Bejeweled 3. Plants vs. Zombies. Glue Man's head. Bishop Runner. And a quite graphically lobotomized portal.
Excellent. Please proceed into the chamber lock after completing each test. First, however, note the incandescent particle field across the exit. This aperture science material.
You probably noticed at some point, or at least I noticed, that the graphical capabilities of the thing were not that great. Like, it was lagging in some areas, and then I realized after I checked the Windows Experience Index score that that score is 4.1 for the gaming graphics. The CPU, memory, and hard drive are otherwise not that bad. This thing is really held back by that ATI Radeon 4200. And that's generally going to be about it. Overall, Windows 7 is still quite a good operating system in 2025, even though I had a handful of problems with my experience here. But I'm not going to criticize the OS for that. That's mainly just I was having a couple problems because that can generally be attributed to this computer to some extent. So I'll leave it at that. Also, we're not going to be concluding this video with a shutdown because this just got stuck and wouldn't really shut down. So yeah, Windows 7 is just really nice, I guess.